Welcome to Opinions My Own. My name's Paul Caulfield. I'm a longtime practitioner in regulated financial services, risk management, and cybersecurity. I'm a partner at the law firm of Ruddy Gregory and an adjunct professor at Fordham University's School of Law. Today is September 11th. 23 years ago, I began my career in the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. September 4th, 2001 to be exact. And during that first week, I met Eugene Kowel. We were both rookies, as they called us back then. We all know what happened a week later. We all know what happened 23 years ago. When we left the DA's office, we took different paths. I went into private practice, practicing law, serving as chief compliance officer, working in risk management and cybersecurity. For the past 5 years, I've taught a course at Fordham on financial crimes and effective risk management. For Gene, for the last 19 years, he's worked for one organization, the FBI. Over the course of our roughly 40-minute conversation, we cover a number of topics. Number one, the FBI's interest internationally so it can protect us domestically. Number two, we talk about Gene and what brought him from the East Coast to the West Coast, and now where he is special agent in charge of Nebraska and Iowa, celebrating 4 years in that area of responsibility. What I think you'll find interesting are the very specific threats facing our food, our feed, and our biofuels, and what the FBI is doing to combat it at the local, the state, and the federal levels. Not just with local law enforcement, but what they're doing to engender cooperation, not just with the private sector, but the farming communities. What I also think you'll enjoy is Gene's palpable commitment that law enforcement upholds its responsibilities in enforcing the Constitution. And in that regard, we'll be talking about the rise of encryption, the increase of these very powerful technologies that criminals are using to evade detection, and how law enforcement is working to combat against it. I hope you enjoy this episode 23 years later from 9/11. May we never forget. Gene, I'm honestly so happy to see you. We've been talking a little bit over the past year and a half, but it's wonderful to see you. I presume you're in your Nebraska field office?
Yeah, we are, Paul. It's great to be here to talk with you, but I'm coming to you live from Omaha, Nebraska.
Very nice. What led you from the DA's office into the FBI? And I do know that your 19 years has brought you not just domestically to Nebraska, but also internationally.
Sure, happy to chat about it. Right, I joined the district attorney's office in 2001 in September, and it was a tremendous opportunity. I love the work. As you know, it's a phenomenal opportunity to really protect and uphold the law in New York and represent the people there across a wide variety of criminal violations. But at some point, I felt a calling or a desire to be more on the front end of cases. As a prosecutor, I felt sometimes the cases were somewhat finished by the time they came to me, and my job was to ensure there was a just outcome. And I was interested in having a role where I could help with the investigative part. And I came across the FBI, and it sounded like a tremendous opportunity. I applied. They invited me back. They said, come do some push-ups. I did. Answered some questions in the interview.
Did they really tell you to do some push-ups?
Well, at some point, as you know, part of the process is there is a physical test. So the process to be an FBI agent is lengthy, but it involves multiple interviews, background checks, testing, and at one point a physical test of push-ups, running, sit-ups, to ensure you have sort of the skills, background, and I guess physical agility to become an agent.
Where did you start initially?
Sure. So I went to the FBI Academy in 2005. My first office was New York. I was assigned to the Joint Terrorism Task Force. I primarily worked for both criminal cases with a nexus to terrorism and other terrorism-related investigations. I had a few opportunities to go overseas on behalf of the Bureau in furtherance of our counterterrorism mission to Iraq and Afghanistan. Then I went to headquarters in Washington, D.C. as part of our International Terrorism Operations Section. I was a supervisor there. After that, I was lucky enough to go to Savannah, Georgia. I was the supervisor for Southeast Georgia. So I was over all of our criminal and counterterrorism investigations there for like a 19-county region in the Savannah, Brunswick, Georgia area. After that, I went to Los Angeles as an assistant special agent in charge. In Los Angeles, I oversaw a gang, violent crime, organized crime, drug trafficking program. Then back to headquarters for a short stint, and then was able to come here to Omaha, Nebraska about 4 years ago, where here I oversee all of the FBI operations across Iowa and Nebraska.
Some of your travels, how much of your domestic or international travels are you able to self-direct, self-promote, as opposed to the FBI saying, "Hey, this is where we want to go, want you to go because either we need people or we're looking at you and we think that you'll be good there"?
For me, in my career, a lot of the opportunities have been ones that I saw, I identified, I thought I had some relevant skills that I thought could be of value, and I expressed interest or applied, and then was selected for those positions. At various points, there are other roles I've played where I was asked to do them. I think based on certain experiences I might have had, but primarily, I've been very fortunate that my career in the FBI has been sort of one that I've chosen. I've identified opportunities that I thought I could add value to, that I thought I would enjoy, that I had skills that were relevant for, and I applied and was selected for them.
What brought you to the Afghanistans and the Iraqs of the world?
When I joined the FBI, I can't remember what I thought about our overseas footprint. All I can say is that it wasn't on the front of my mind. I was joining the FBI because I wanted to fight terrorism, fight violent gangs, fight organized crime, go after public corruption, investigate these crimes domestically. And I soon learned or gained a real appreciation for the fact that the FBI has a broad overseas footprint. We have offices in over 70 countries. And we do that because we learned a long time ago that we can't fight terrorism, we can't catch fugitives, we can't go after child predators, we can't fight cybercrime by sort of just waiting for it to come to the U.S. We have to have this forward-leaning presence. We have to have very robust relationships with our law enforcement and intelligence partners in these countries. So some of my longer deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan were part of sort of a big team and a variety of missions in those places, primarily working on to mitigate the counterterrorism threat to U.S. interests, U.S. people, to the United States of America itself. A lot of my work involved in Afghanistan, responding to the scenes of bombings, investigating those, working with local agencies, local police. In Iraq, similar work, working to identify counterterrorism threats to the U.S. or to our personnel and to help mitigate those threats.
You've been in Nebraska now, at least as a special agent in charge for, I think you're going on 4 years.
That's right. It'll be 4 years in October.
What brought you to Nebraska?
So we had no family tie to Nebraska, but when I decided this is an opportunity I wanted to have to be a special agent in charge of a field office to lead FBI operations in the field, Nebraska just seemed like an amazing place. The Omaha Field Office is a very strong office. We cover a lot of different areas. We cover a vast territory, 2 whole states, Iowa and Nebraska, and we have 8 sub-offices throughout. So to me, it seemed like an opportunity where I knew I could work with really good partners on the state and local level, on the federal level as well. I knew there'd be good work to do, and I knew it'd be a great place for me personally to raise my family. So I saw the opportunity, I applied, and I'm very honored to have been selected for it.
We talked about this in preparing to have this conversation. Researching your outreach. I can see how active you are on, LinkedIn and some other social media sites. You write for the Nebraska Examiner, and it does seem like you're intentionally trying to get out there and introduce not just who the FBI is and even local law enforcement. I think you've written about the importance of local, federal, state, international law enforcement working closely together. Where'd you get that from, of being a outside from behind one's desk manager of what is, law enforcement and counterterrorism?
I think what we know in the FBI, what I found to be true in my career, is that the greater degree that people in the community know that we're here, they find us to be a trusted partner, the greater degree they'll come to us for help with cases. Whether it's a CEO whose company got hit with a cyber attack, whether it's someone in a neighborhood who has witnessed to a violent crime or gang activity or has been the victim of extortion, by an organized crime element, whether it's someone whose family or a child who's been targeted by a sexual predator. Whatever the crime is, we find a greater degree that we can get out there in the community and talk to people, explain what we do, explain our role, explain that we're not only in New York and DC, but we're here in Nebraska, we're here in Omaha, we're in Lincoln, we're in Grand Island, we're in North Platte, we're in Des Moines, we're in Sioux City, we're in Cedar Rapids, we're in Waterloo, we're in Quad Cities. We're throughout the whole territory, ready to respond to help people. I think the greater degree that we do that, the greater degree we can fulfill our mission of protecting the American people and upholding the Constitution. And I'll tell you, one role that we play a lot here in this office is really providing support and partnering with state and local law enforcement. There's a lot of very small departments in our area, and often they might have a significant crime, a major crime, where they need an enhancement of resources. And we're positioned to do that. We're positioned to come in and help them, whether it's respond to an active shooter, help them with a significant violent crime, and support them in their case, even if it's not a federal violation. You know, if you were to walk through our office here and walk through the squad areas, you would have a hard time telling who's an FBI agent, who's with the local police department, who's with the state patrol. We all work together and sit side by side, whether we're combating gang violence, crimes against children, cybercrime, the counterterrorism threat, the counterintelligence threat. Whatever the threat is, we all work together. And we learned a long time ago that for us to be effective, we have to have strong partnerships on the local and state level.
When you came to Nebraska and you had such a large remit over not just Nebraska, but also Iowa, and then you've got different types of threats, and you know, it's our fuel, it's our feed, it's our food, it's the heartland. How did you transition from criminal behaviors that were street level, white collar, to then moving into heartland type crimes?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, the FBI has a very broad authority, right? We investigate counterterrorism, we investigate cybercrime, we also investigate drug trafficking, we investigate white collar crime, civil rights. You know, we have a broad portfolio. And I think one of the benefits, or one of the, I think, most enjoyable parts of being an FBI agent is the opportunity to work, what we would say, to work different violations throughout your career. You know, you can work drug trafficking, and then you can work protecting children, then you can move to counterterrorism, then you can move to cyber. So I think the FBI has this culture of developing basic skill sets, and then allowing people the opportunity to diversify throughout their career. For me, as a leader of an office, you know, part of what we do in our office here and every FBI office across the country is we look at the threats in our AOR every year, and we examine, like, what are the most significant threats? How are they changing? Where do we need to surge resources to? You know, what are we seeing an influx of? What are we doing a good job combating? What are some things we know? What are some things we don't know? We need to learn more about. So for me, coming to Nebraska and Iowa, I realized pretty quickly that, you know, the major industry in my area is agriculture, in providing the food, feed, and biofuel which supports our nation. And it's a major industry in both our two states. And it's also, as you know, it's a vital segment of our critical infrastructure. You know, anything that affects national security, economic security, public health, and agriculture hits all three is something very significant we want to work with our partners to protect. So coming here, although this may not have been sort of a threat I worked on as much when I was an agent in New York, for example, here we identified this is an area the FBI needs to be very forward-leaning, working with our private sector partners, our public sector partners, academia, law enforcement, the intelligence community, to ensure we're doing everything we can to mitigate threats to the ag sector. Just last month, we hosted a sort of a region-wide agricultural threat summit. And we had over 400 people from, I think, 30 states come to really talk about how we can all work together to help protect the ag sector. It's been an amazing opportunity to be here, kind of touring around, talking with farmers, producers, agricultural workers, learning about what they're seeing and how we can work together to protect the industry.
In addition to that grassroots information sharing where you're having people from multiple states come and you share, are there any other mechanisms that law enforcement, whether it's federal, local, or state or international, can share with that local community, Heartland in particular?
Well, sure. I mean, there's some things that we do to help bolster the information sharing. You know, we sponsor a group called InfraGuard, I don't know if you're familiar with InfraGard, but it's an organization every FBI office sponsors where individuals can join who represent different segments of the community, and we can provide threat information to them using the cyber arena and infrastructure arena. There's other groups we have, the DSAC group. There's other groups we have for like larger companies to join where we can share intelligence at a more rapid clip. And then there's other things we do like our Citizens Academy, where every year we'll invite in citizens and take them through sort of a mini tour of the FBI here and what we're focused down on. And we think by doing that, by building awareness of the threats, it creates that two-way exchange where we know who to reach out to if we have questions, but people also know how to reach out to us. I'm always amazed, I'll talk to groups, citizen groups, and sometimes they really don't know how to reach out to the FBI. They don't even know that they can reach out to the FBI. And we welcome calls from the public, whether they call our office directly, whether they reach out to us at 1-800-CALL-FBI, whether they go to online and submit a tip. I mean, we welcome that input from the public because we know the public will see things that we often won't see or don't see until they come to us with it, especially threat information. So we find it's a really great two-way street, all this outreach we do, both collecting information, but letting people know how they can contact us.
One of the things you've written about and you've been vocal about, and it's not just you, it's law enforcement in particular, is tied towards cyber criminals and the use of technology to now further their goals. A few episodes ago, I had an expert on, and we actually toured the dark web. And it's not indexed. It's very bulky. You've really got to know what you're doing in order to get in there and accomplish any task, be it identity theft, child pornography, trafficking in anything, purchasing anything. But in this aspect of encrypted technologies, be it Telegram, which is hitting the news recently, WhatsApp, we're able to engage in encrypted communications or messages with one another. Give me a little bit of a background around what Section 702 is and how it's been effective and how it can become more effective in helping law enforcement in investigating cases.
Sure. Well, I think it's a great question. There's many different layers to the question. I think first I'll say in terms of like social media and the degree to which we all live our lives in the digital arena, I mean, things have changed tremendously, even since you and I started as prosecutors. And I think when you and I started, it was rare for us to do a warrant that wasn't physical in nature, right? To help with a search warrant that wasn't like a location or a vehicle or safety deposit box. It was done, but it was sort of rare. And now it's hard to think of a single case that might not involve some sort of evidence or intelligence stored in some digital media, whether on a device like a phone or a tablet or computer, whether from a provider, stored in the cloud. And so having access to that intelligence and that evidence is crucial to our mission. And we call it the lawful access challenge. What that is that there are some companies and devices which increasingly becoming out of reach for us, even with a lawful court order, to get the evidence or intelligence we need to keep people safe. And whether it's data at rest, like on a device, or whether it's data in motion that's being stored somewhere, those things are really important for us to be able to use.
One term you used was warrant proof. What makes it warrant proof, whether it's at rest, in storage, or in transit?
I think when we use the term warrant proof, what we're referring to is the fact that even if we went to a judge and had probable cause that there's evidence stored on this device, or that this provider might have evidence that we need for a case, and got that warrant signed, even if that happened, there are times now where we're not able to get the information. Like it's encrypted to a degree that either the provider or the manufacturer can't decrypt it or won't decrypt it. And so that is a challenge for us in law enforcement. And I think if you talk, it's not just a challenge for the FBI. If you talk to any of our state and local partners, your local police department, your local sheriff's department, your state police, they're all having the same issue of needing to get certain evidence to support a case that they have probable cause to believe is there, but can't get it due to technical limitations.
how do you balance the civil liberties versus the rightful need for law enforcement to use this very important data to accomplish its very specific goals?
Sure. The FBI, our mission is a twofold mission. Our mission is to protect the American people and uphold the Constitution. And it's a dual mission. Neither one ever comes at a cost to the other. In fact, we're the nation's leading law enforcement agency charged with protecting civil rights. So we take this very seriously. We're not asking for a backdoor. We're not asking for, information of the entire American public. What we're saying in law enforcement, whether it's the FBI or a local police agency, is that if we seize a device or we believe there's information relevant to a crime and we have probable cause to believe there's evidence of a crime on a device, for instance, we should be able to get that information if we have a warrant from a judge. And for us, there's no civil liberties conflict in that issue. Our Constitution talks about this. The Fourth Amendment talks about this, that if you get a warrant, you should be able to get certain evidence of a crime. What we're finding now is there's some things that seem to be out of reach of a warrant.
Do you see Congress? Do you see the private sector? Do you see both as creating headwinds or giving any tailwinds to the effort to strike that proper balance of guarding the civil liberties while being able to do your job and protect the country and the world?
Sure. What I can tell you is this, like from our vantage point here in Iowa and Nebraska, we execute a lot of search warrants. We arrest a lot of individuals across a wide variety of crimes and national security threats. And our ability to obtain sort of the evidence we need to make these cases is really critical to protecting the American people and upholding the Constitution. So, yeah, we think it's a mixture of everything. We think whether it's a combination of ensuring we have the right legislation in place, whether it's working with the private sector companies and the technical community to ensure there's a technical solution. The FBI is never asking for any sort of backdoor. What we're asking for is that there be a technical solution for law enforcement to obtain the evidence they need when supported by a warrant to support their cases.
How do you walk that cyber beat in around the biofuels, feeds, the grains? Is there a timing aspect to it when you think of planting and harvesting? How do you let the rest of the world know that you're in fact walking that cyber beat and protecting the agricultural technologies?
Well, I think a lot of it comes down to the outreach you and I talked about. I think, part of our job, part of our mission is really getting out there and talking to people, whether it's in the private sector, industry, academia, letting them know that we're here and how we can help them mitigate these threats. One difference we have versus, say, the People's Republic of China, is that in America, most of our critical infrastructure, whether it's agriculture, whether it's communications, banking, telecom, it sits in private sector hands. Like it's not owned by the government. So for us to help protect it, we really depend on these partnerships. And these partnerships are voluntary partnerships. If you go to China, a lot of companies are compelled to provide information to the government. Like it's written into their laws. They have to provide this information if upon request. And here in America, we don't have that. We depend on these voluntary relationships. We saw a time, it was about 2 years ago now, when a series of grain cooperatives were hit by ransomware schemes right around the fall harvest. We've seen these schemes happen, and there's a couple of threats we're worried about the most that we try to educate people on. One is the halting by maybe criminal elements of agricultural operations during critical times, whether it's planting, harvesting, whether they could, the degree to which, I'll tell you this, I think this is the bottom line, that more than most people realize, our agricultural community now is really tied into the digital world. And with the advent of precision agriculture, cloud computing, so much critical data and control of ag equipment happens in the digital arena. And so we worry a lot about a criminal actor using some sort of cyber scheme to kind of stop and halting operations during a critical time. The other thing we worry about is theft of our data by a foreign adversary. Primarily the People's Republic of China, but others as well. We worry about the theft of our data and our technology, and we've seen these cases. We've made these cases before of companies affiliated with the People's Republic of China stealing agricultural technology and taking it back home with them. And three, I think maybe one of the biggest threats we were concerned about is a foreign adversary, especially implanting malware on our critical infrastructure related to whether it's agriculture, clean water, energy, sewage, and having the ability to really hurt Americans in a time of conflict, right? Having the ability to halt production during a time of international conflict. And that's something we're very concerned about as well. And then the fourth threat we're worried about, we talk a lot with the agricultural community on, is I guess what I would call the bio warfare or bioterrorism threat. Is we talk a lot about computer viruses, but we can't ever neglect the fact that there are real viruses that can do a tremendous amount of damage. And if a foreign adversary or a criminal actor or a terrorist actor wanted to sort of unleash any virus into our livestock or our population, it could also have devastating effects on our ability to grow food for the American public and really the world.
Is there a public case that came about within the past, say, 3 or 4 years that you think is a textbook example of being able to harness cooperation, be it locally and federally or federally and internationally, and being able to use the cyber counterterrorism to get ahead of, what could have been a significant event? And I'm saying public, obviously.
Listen, there's a lot of cases out there in the public domain. I think any search, on the internet, you'll find them. Some things we can't talk about, some things we do talk about. They've resulted in judicial outcomes. But I think you'll see there's quite a record of us working with the private sector to sort of protect whatever segment of critical infrastructure there is. It's a message we're trying to get out, and we spend a lot of time getting out, is for leaders of companies that if they're the victim of, let's say, a cyber event, a cyber crime, to contact us, that we can help. There's a lot of things we can do to help both perhaps get them back in business, but also to attribute where the attack came from and impose some measure in sort of joint sequenced operations, but impose some measure of consequences and accountability on the cyber adversary. But for that, we depend on people to call us. I would also say, I know we've been talking a lot about industry and corporations, but even with individual people, the amount of sort of cyber scams and frauds that are being perpetrated has grown exponentially over the years. I mean, almost every one of us, I'm sure you could do the same, has friends or family who've been hit with some sort of scheme online. And one thing we tell people is that if you become the victim of a crime, to call us. Call the FBI, go to our website, ic3.gov, and report it. And there's a lot of things we can do. And in fact, if people report it soon enough, sometimes we even have the ability to enact a kill chain to get the money back, especially if it's to a domestic bank account. We often have the ability, if we're notified quickly enough, to help the victim stop the transfer of funds and make them whole again.
Whether it's been in my private practice or speaking with experts in the field around cybersecurity, is that reticence to disclose that one's been taken advantage of in the romance scams, for example, in the crypto coin scams. There's this embarrassment. And how do you wipe that away and say it's not a matter of self-preservation and embarrassment. It's a matter of protecting you and also getting your story out there, because that can then help someone else.
It's only going to get worse. And I hate to say that, but I think with the advent of artificial intelligence, the ability of criminals to perpetrate these scams on scale is going to have a profound effect, right? We've already seen this transition from just to launch a cyber attack or a ransomware scheme. The amount of proficiency you need to have in the cyber arena has declined greatly. Like perhaps 10 years ago, you had to sort of have some expertise of how to do it. And now, you talked about your visit to the dark web on your last episode. Now you could purchase ransomware almost as a software for a service on the dark web, and even receive instructions of how to implement it and how to sort of obtain ransom back and how to coordinate the payments. So the level of technical know-how you need to have has already been diminishing. The ability to use AI to sort of do a vast amount of schemes at the same time, or even, and this is almost worse, to use AI generated content to imitate a person's voice or likeness to commit a scheme is going to make these much worse, right? It used to be perhaps they would be done over emails, or maybe you get in sort of the classic grandparent scam or virtual kidnapping scam. Maybe you get a phone call or an email where someone threatens you by saying they have a loved one kidnapped, or they need money for something. But now with AI, they can generate actual interactive voice personas or even video personas of someone to the point where you won't be able to trust what you're hearing or seeing. You think you're actually talking to a loved one who might be asking you to wire money, or you think you're talking to a colleague at your law firm who is saying, hey, would you mind transferring money to this account? And it looks like them, it sounds like them, something which now you'd have no reason to doubt in the very near future, if not already now, cyber criminals will have the ability to use this to perpetrate schemes. So I think bad as this problem is, the threat we're going to see in the coming years is really going to grow exponentially.
My hope in that regard is going to force an acceleration of self-sovereign ID. Are you familiar with the concept of self-sovereign?
Tell me more what you're referring
Yeah,
to.
so self-sovereign, and there's a number of different businesses out there. Sovereign, SOVRIN, is actually a federation that's trying to really get this out there. Basically, it's take you and I are done. Our IDs are out there. Like, sadly, our kids' IDs are out there too. But in moving towards what's a self-sovereign is all my biometrics, all my identification is encrypted on my phone, nowhere else. And so what happens is through a handshake protocol, more or less, you're able to, for that moment, that transaction only, be able to, with a bank, with getting your coffee, whatever, identify yourself during that moment, and it's captured. The bank, because it has record retention requirements, is able to keep an audit trail that handshake occurred, but they don't retain the data. And so what I think is going to happen, and this is probably 30 years away, is we're going to have two ecosystems. There is going to be an ecosystem online where everyone has their own data and no one else has it. And there is a protocol in which you're able to enter the marketplace or not. And then you've got this, what's now happening in the dark web is everything else. And I don't think I'm being too optimistic, because you're going to create a much safer environment, marketplace online, because you've taken on that social contract of saying, all right, my data's in my phone. I'm only going to be able to give it, and the other entity is only going to be able to possess it for a very, very specific purpose that I've okayed. I hope that's where we go. I do agree with you that for the short term and maybe even medium term, that we're going to be in that scarier marketplace, like you've said. But I hope the technologies not just advance, but I hope companies and individuals accept the trade-off in what that would mean for us positively. Take 314B, for example. I've said this a million times about 314B. It's a voluntary information sharing platform between financial institutions to fight financial crime. And its Achilles heel is it's voluntary, as opposed to other guardrails that would incentivize the banks to share information and fight financial crime risk the way that they've been combating and sharing data to manage credit risk since the mid 1880 is when they first started sharing data for credit risk.
You bring up some great points. I guess I would say this. I know the threat will evolve, and I know, we'll develop counters to it. All I can say is that one thing I am very confident about is, here in the FBI, really for our entire history, for over 115 years, this is what we've had to do, is sort of innovate to keep up with the threat. Whether we're talking about the 1940s with interstate bank robbery gangs, whether we go up to the 50s or 60s or 70s or different threats we have to encounter, we've always had to sort of evolve and innovate and bring sort of the science of law enforcement to attack some of these issues. And so I know the threat will continue to change. I know we'll develop technical solutions to counter on the private sector side. And I also know the FBI, we will continue to evolve to meet these threats. The technology will change. We'll have to change our tactics to go after these adversaries and these bad actors. But we've always been able to do that, and I'm confident we will. But we'll take work on all of the part of law enforcement to keep up.
Yeah. Well, look, 23 years ago, September 4, you and I started our time in the DA's office. We know what happened a week later. I think I told you in a phone call a couple of years ago, I remember us a few weeks after that in training, and you still had very, very red eyes. And I'm not trying to, embarrass you, but, I do remember that one of the first things that you did when the towers got hit is you ran outside of our building and ran those 8-10 blocks to what became Ground Zero. That has stayed with me for 23 years. And whether you did it individually because that event happened or what you've done now over the course of your career, I really think is marvelous. And so with that, thank you for both your service as well as the way that you're doing it and conducting yourself. Really want to thank you for everything. So I appreciate you being with me.
No, thank you for the opportunity. It's hard to believe it's been 23 years since 9/11. Yeah, I remember that as well. I remember, I suffered some severe corneal abrasions. And so for a long time after, it took my eyes a while to recover. But, I'm very honored to be where I am here in the FBI, working with just some tremendous people, whether it's agents or analysts, professional staff, with partners on the state, local, federal, international side, really working hard to combat the threats of the day. Counterterrorism continues to be our number one threat in the Bureau. We're also very focused on the counterintelligence threat and the cyber threat, and still in the vast array of criminal threats where for over a century, we've stood shoulder to shoulder with our partners to combat those threats. So I feel very honored and privileged to be able to be here with the FBI, doing whatever I can, contributing whatever I can, in the fight to sort of keep Americans safe and uphold the Constitution. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to talk with you today. Thank you for your questions, very insightful questions. And I hope this has been some benefit to you and your listeners.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Please like, please share, please subscribe. Thank you for listening.